Morning Show with Anthony here on 92.9 and 96.9 EHM. A great mystery arose just a few short months ago when the new Dan Auerbach record came out, Waiting on a Song. First, we listened to the album and loved it. And then as we started looking at the album, we couldn't help but think to ourselves, boy, there's something about that looks really, really familiar. And it kind of racked my brains, but I kind of threw it to the background. And then I started getting a message here and a message there. And then a message came in on the website the other day, wehm.com, and I just thought, you know what? We're gonna figure this out. So we put it out there, and next thing we knew, we discovered who the artist was behind the new Dan Auerbach album cover. And he joins us on the phone right now. Perry Shell is on the phone with us here. Perry, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, man. First of all, awesome work on the album cover. It's obviously sparked a lot of interest down here on Long Island, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's funny. I had no idea that many people were so interested in this cover specifically.
Yeah, I mean, there's just something, like I went on the limb and saying I think, and we'll get down to this, I think you guys designed it to evoke that feeling of a 70s album, but I can't help but think that it is like a really close resemblance to one, and we just can't nail it down. But anyway, we will get to that in a little bit. PerryShall.com for more info, and you guys are at Perry. Is it Shall or Shall? What, am I saying it right? Shall?
Yeah, you're actually saying it right. Most people don't, but it's shall, like the word.
Shall. Okay. So PerryShall.com, and on Twitter and Instagram at PerryShall. So let's start with a little background. From what I understand, you're a musician yourself, and you had been doing some things down there in Nashville, and you were playing with a band who Dan decided to produce. And is that how you guys all got hooked up?
Sort of. So I live in Philly. I'm born and raised here, and I worked with a band called Jeff the Brotherhood from Nashville, who I would go on tour with, not playing with, but like, you know, they're my good friends, so I would go hang out, sell their merch, you know, help them tour manage, drive their van, all that stuff. And Dan produced one of their records, and they kind of, you know, hooked us up back then. That was over 5 or 6 years ago now, I think.
And what was it? He asked the band, like, hey, who does your stuff? It's something that you had done kind of intrigued him.
Yeah, I guess so. So it's funny. I was obviously familiar with his music on some level, but I honestly still thought at that point that they were kind of this like more underground band. Like that's how I was introduced to them when early on. And so they were like, you know, we're going to Dan's studio. Do you want to come with? And I was actually working on their artwork. We were about to leave for a tour, and I really wanted to get the work done. So I said, no, it's okay. You guys go to the studio, and I'll see you when you get back. I'm going to keep working. And they came back, and they were like, hey, Dan has a couple things he wants to see if you want to try doing the art for, just like a logo for his studio or something. And I'm thinking, I don't really know how big of a deal this actually is at the time. I just kind of thought, yeah, sure, why not? It's another job. This guy seems cool. Why not? So they put me in touch, and we emailed back and forth. We worked on the logo for his recording studio. And then, you know, he started emailing me here and there. Can you try drawing this thing for me? Can you do this thing? And it was all little stuff. And I thought, this is cool. Some extra work, you know. And eventually it turned into doing artwork for another record he produced for this guy Bombino, and that ended up being a pretty big deal. And then it kind of just kept going from there. I mean, we didn't talk for a couple of years. He was busy with the arcs and touring, and I wasn't doing the art for that stuff. And then we just reconnected again, you know, within the past year or two.
I love how one of the biggest rock stars selling out Madison Square Garden, and you're like, oh, this guy seems cool.
Well, you know what's funny? I'm not sure if I've even mentioned this to him before. I can't remember, but it didn't hit me until I was out at like maybe a thrift store. It might have even been like a CVS or something. And I hear this song playing on the radio over the loudspeaker or whatever. And I'm like, that's the Black Keys. Because I recognize, I liked some of their early records at that time, so I knew who they were and stuff. But I'm in a store and I'm hearing it over the radio, and I said, "Oh, that's how big they are." So it was kind of funny because I liked some of those early records at the time, but I just thought they started off as a pretty underground kind of band real early on, and I guess I was out of the loop.
No, it's a good way to judge it though. When you hit CVS stores, that's pretty much you've hit a level.
Yeah, it was pretty funny, and I had an idea, but I guess I was just, for me it was just like, this guy seems cool. I'll keep working for him, whatever. And this is like 5 or 6 years ago, so I mean, I definitely don't have a real excuse for it, but it's pretty funny.
That's awesome.
Every time I think about that story, I'm like, yeah, my mom and dad would have known. I didn't know.
Perry Shall is with us here now. And what's funny about this too is, so you're I mean, I would say you're designing some pretty big stuff, not just the album cover, but the posters and everything else. And you don't have any like formidable training in Illustrator and Photoshop or all these things. So you just kind of fell into designing. Yeah,
I mean, it's I think it would be fair to say I fell into it, but at the same time, I've been creating art and making art since, I know everybody says, when you're a kid, of course, somebody puts crayons in front of you and you draw, but I really have been doing it since I was a kid, and, all my school notebooks and all that stuff were filled with way more drawings than notes. So eventually, when you're
me too, man.
Younger,
I'm with you on that one. I got a lot more drawings than notes in those notebooks too. All right, so you were an artist. You just weren't really doing the whole like the software they use nowadays to design. That's really where you weren't.
I mean, it really went from MS Paint to, in high school, somebody showed me what Photoshop was, and I was like, oh, this seems like it would be a lot easier to use. And so I figured out Photoshop, myself, and I'm still figuring it out really all these years. But Illustrator, I just don't really understand. I know there's ways to use it properly, and of course, but like I feel way more comfortable doing most of my work by hand. And then, you tweak it a little bit in Photoshop until it's right. But
that's awesome.
For the most part, a lot of it, I mean, everything goes through my hands. If there's a photo that needs to be cut out, I cut it out by hand and scan it and all that stuff. And yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, cool. All right. I think you're going to lead the charge, Perry, in bringing MS Paint back to design. That'd be the best.
I don't use it anymore. But
all right, so listen.
If they want to sponsor me.
Let's talk about this album cover because I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Give me the background of it. First of all, is there one album that you were like, we're just going to replicate this, or is it literally just elements of different albums? Like, is there a mystery? But can we solve this mystery, or is there really no one album that you guys were replicating with this?
Well, I'll tell you. I'm going to leave you hanging for a second, but basically, like what we're doing with the label, because I do all the artwork for the label, so every release and every detail that you see is probably it should be my art. So the whole idea behind the art for the label and everything we do is for it to look not 70s per se, and of course it ends up looking that way in a lot of ways, but more just like classic. So if you're at a record store or you're looking at, usually if you're let's say if you're at a record store and you're flipping through records and you pull this record out, I don't want you to think, oh, this looks like a record that came out in 2001,
right? Or
like this looks like it came out. We just want it to look classic, so it can be from any time period, or it's comforting to look at. For me, at least, it's very reminiscent, like you said, of a lot of things. Now, when I came up with this, I wasn't trying to. I say me, but like Dan and I work on all the art together, so it wasn't supposed to be one specific thing, and it is a lot of elements of different album covers, but nothing specific on purpose at all. Honestly, it's funny that you guys are interested in this and that I keep seeing people online posting about it too, but everybody has their own version of like, no way, this is the exact album cover that they ripped off. Look at the colors that they used, and look at the font. Like, I didn't even, those aren't fonts that I use. I scan in letters from books and stuff like that. So it wasn't a direct thing like, let me find the font from this Barry Manilow record or something, which is one I get a lot. But no, it's just like I have typography books, and I scan the letters in, and I drag every letter into the, the artwork and until it looks good. I don't know.
Oh my God. So you scanned every one of those letters in and put them next to each other?
Yeah.
Oh, bless your heart. Okay, so now just a little background. I'm sort of like a junior. I do some design on the side. It's just like a little hobby thing. Perry, there's so many easier ways to do this, man. I'm telling you.
I know. I mean, I know how to do it with, I know how to use fonts and all that stuff. But for me, when the artwork that our artwork is reminiscent of was being made, people weren't sitting there just typing up. I mean, some of it they were typing on a computer, and of course I do type stuff too. But it was done by hand, and those letters were placed individually and lined up like that. So
I see. So it was more about like you not only wanted to make the feel of the old days, but you actually put yourself in those same shoes and created it the same way they did back in the day.
Right. And I mean, you can go to Target and buy a distressed T-shirt of AC/DC, but it's going to look like a distressed T-shirt someone made in Photoshop. I want stuff to feel the way the old ones felt, because that's how they did it, and that's how you get that feeling. You like, it's an actual feeling when you look at that album cover and you think, man, this reminds me of such and such record or this time period or whatever. And there's a lot of little details that nobody's going to know that I feel the need to do, because it feels more true to the project,
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's paid off, because you can see the feelings that it evokes, because we've been like racking our brains with this for a long time, and it kind of came to a head 2 days ago when everybody was posting, like you said. It's funny that you said Barry Manilow, and you get it a lot, because we got Barry Manilow, we got Neil Young Decade, we got a lot of Allman Brothers and all that. Everybody was coming up with a lot of that stuff. So you literally, the work that you put in that nobody really sees is paying off, because it's driving something in all of us who take a look at this thing. So good job, man. Really, really good job.
Thank you. No, I love that. And it's really funny, because I spend many, many hours at thrift stores. I've been doing this since I was a kid, like going to thrift stores and flea markets. So I sometimes I need a break from working, and I tell Dan, like, hey, I'm going to go to the thrift store, and I just look through records and books and stuff just to get ideas and, some kind of inspiration and whatnot, just to see, what colors I like, or which kind of fonts or text, and all that stuff. So it's funny, because you find those Neil Diamond or Barry Manilow, whatever, and I wish I found that Neil Young record there, but you find all that stuff at thrift stores and whatnot, and it works for me.
That's awesome. All right, Perry Shell, you are a true artist. Thank you so much for making some time. Are you working on anything now? Anything with Dan, or any other things that you're excited to just mention?
Yeah, I mean, there's not. We just finished a 7-inch for Link Ray, the legendary guitarist, and we have a bunch of other stuff that I guess we can't really talk about too much. But I'm going to Nashville on February 1st to do a talk with Dan on design and music. That should be pretty cool. And I just realized I just found out yesterday, actually, it sold out. So I don't even know if it helps to tell people about it, but.
All right, well, that's awesome, man.
Cool.
I think, I think. Look, you're a pretty cool dude. I love your work. I was looking at some of the other stuff that you were mentioning too, and we'll link it up with the interview here. Some of the other stuff that led you to Dan, and the Bombino and all that, and it's cool stuff, man. So whenever you want a channel to talk about something, you just shoot me a tweet. We'll get you back on.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
You got it, man. All right, take care.
You too. Bye.
All right, there he goes. Perry Shall. We've ended the mystery. So it really isn't just one album. It's just a combination of a few. And it's still, even after hearing him say it, I still can't help but think that I've seen this exact album cover before. And maybe it's just part of the genius of what this guy does. I cannot believe that he sat there and cut out each one of those letters just to form that thing. Like I said, I'm a little bit more of an amateur, but there's such an easier way to do it. But you know what? Oftentimes, as is with songwriting or art or design, or not for nothing, hosting a radio show, it's the work that nobody really sees that you put in that 9 times out of 10 maybe is a waste of time. But every now and then really is that extra little kick that you need to make something great. And yeah, they just did a really good job with this one. I still feel like I saw this album cover 25, 30 years ago. I really do. But, you know, if he says it was just a thing that came about, I'm going to have to believe him. Perry also designed the Easy Eye Sound logo and the Easy Eye Eddie, the mascot for Easy Eye Sound, that is Dan's recording studio. He did all the posters from this tour and did some of the singles that came out from the album. So Perry's an interesting dude, getting his inspiration from thrift shops. Who would have thought? He's a legit artist. Pretty good. Pretty cool. All right, so I hope we at least, I know we didn't really solve the mystery, but we kind of did. We kind of brought it to a closure. So now we know the story behind Dan Auerbach's album artwork. Our thanks to Perry Shall, perryshall.com on Twitter and Instagram at Perry Shall for getting us a little bit closer to the music and the artwork on The Morning Show with Anthony.